The early morning sun found its way through the curtains of Chris Marshall's apartment,
Ow.
sketching faint gold lines across canvases leaning against the walls. He had fallen asleep in his desk chair again, his fingers still stained with charcoal dust. The drawing before him, a half-finished self-portrait, distorted into a shadowy double felt. More like a question than a picture. A soft buzz from his phone pulled him out of the haze. "Rose, don't forget, pack something nice. Mom loves when guests pretend to be formal." He smiled despite his nerves. The idea of spending a weekend with his girlfriend's family, out in their secluded, wooded estate, wasn't exactly relaxing. And though Rose insisted her parents were ridiculously liberal, Chris couldn't ignore the familiar tension curled at the edges of his thoughts. The quiet wondering that inevitably came with being the only black man in certain white spaces. He had learned to treat those thoughts like weather. Pay attention. But don't let them take over the whole sky. Still, something in the pit of his stomach felt heavy. Rose picked him up just after noon. Bursting with the sort of energy only she possessed, she hugged him before he could even shut the door. "Ready?" She beamed, "As I'll ever be." "You're going to be great," she said, brushing her fingers across his cheek. "My parents are harmless." "Embarrassing, yes? Harmless. Absolutely." Her laugh eased him somewhat. The drive was scenic at first, city buildings peeling away into long stretches of highway. Then narrower, winding roads flanked by towering pines. Rose talked nonstop. Stories about her childhood, dramatic reenactments of her mother's helicoptering tendencies, and exaggerated impressions of her father's trying-to-hard-cool dad. Persona. Chris laughed at all the right places. But every mile farther from the city made him feel smaller. Like he was being transported into someone else's world, someone else's rules. The trees grew denser, swallowing the car in shadows. "Relax," Rose teased. "You have that tight forehead thing." He leaned back, exhaling. "Just thinking about what?" He shrugged. "You ever bring a guy home who wasn't white?" She finished for him. "Nope." He raised a brow. "Rose, I swear. But that's not because of them. It's because of me. Bad taste. Terrible judgment. You're a major upgrade." She flashed a grin, placing a hand on his thigh. The gesture helped, but didn't dissolve everything. Some fears didn't respond to affection. They lived deeper. By the time the tall, retiring gates appeared, the sky was beginning to turn a soft amber. The estate was larger than he expected. 3 stories, wide veranda. Walls lined with enormous windows reflecting the forest around them. A picture-perfect refuge. If you liked that sort of isolation, Rose honked twice. The gates opened slowly, like something exhaling. "See," she said brightly. Totally normal. Wealthy, but normal. Yet something about the house made Chris feel observed. Not watched, exactly anticipated. Rose's parents were already on the porch when they parked. Her father, Dean Armitage, was tall and cheerful, wearing a vest that made him look like a retired geography professor on vacation. Her mother, Catherine, had the kind of composure that radiated polite intensity, her smile warm, but her gaze sharp. "Chris." Dean boomed before Chris could even reach the steps. "Welcome, son. Great to finally meet you." He pulled Chris into a hug that lasted a beat too long. Catherine followed, greeting him with a cool kiss on the cheek. "We've heard so much about you," she said. "Rose talks nonstop." "Good things, I hope," Chris managed. "Oh, only the best." She answered. Rose looked proud, as though introducing him were an accomplishment. Inside, the house felt even larger. Polished wooden floors, antique furniture, walls decorated with photos of Rose's ancestors' stern faces in sepia tones. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something earthy, almost metallic. "So, Chris," Dean said. Gesturing for him to sit in the living room, Rose told us, "You're a photographer." "That's wonderful. Art has such a powerful role in shaping culture." "Thanks," Chris said. "I try." Dean sat across from him, leaning forward with eager sincerity. "Just so you know," he said, "I would have voted for the first black president a 3rd time if I could. Loved that guy. Dad, Rose groaned. What? Dean asked. It's true. Chris forced a polite smile. It wasn't the first time he'd heard something like that. But usually it came from strangers on trains, not potential in-laws. Catherine cleared her throat softly. Dinner will be ready soon. Chris, if you need anything, please let me know. Her tone was kind, but clinical, like she was cataloging him, actually. Dean added, I was hoping you'd join me outside later. I'd love to show you the yard. We've got a few helpers around here, he chuckled. Don't worry, they're family to us. Something in the way he said helpers made the back of Chris's neck tense. Rose nudged him. He means the groundskeepers, Chris said. Sure, he tried not to sound uneasy as the evening unfolded. Things only grew stranger. The groundskeeper, a broad-shouldered man named Walter, appeared occasionally near the window, a fleeting silhouette moving with rigid precision. Each time Chris glanced toward him, Walter seemed to be staring straight back, though his expression never changed. Serious, fixed, as if he were memorizing Chris rather than watching him. Inside, the housekeeper, Georgina, drifted through rooms with an eerie grace. She smiled often, but the smiles ended well before they reached her eyes. More than once, Chris caught her gazing into a mirror, touching her own face lightly, almost with awe. When she noticed him watching, she'd snap back into motion. Smiling too widely, Chris found himself gripping his phone, thumb hovering over his best friend's contact. He wanted to text something like, Bro, this place is weird, but didn't want to seem paranoid. Rose's family was eccentric, sure, old-fashioned in some ways, but not alarming. He repeated that to himself more times than he could count. Dinner was a theatrical mix of politeness and subtle interrogation. Rose's younger brother Jeremy arrived late, immediately radiating loud, intrusive curiosity. So, Jeremy said, abruptly leaning across the table, you work out? You look like someone who could have played a sport. Maybe jujitsu. Chris paused mid-bite. Not really. You should, Jeremy insisted. With your, he gestured vaguely at Chris's body, genetics. You could be a beast if you wanted, Jeremy. Catherine snapped quietly. Eat. What? Rose kicked him under the table. Ignore him. He's Jeremy. No offense taken, Chris lied. But something about the intensity in Jeremy's eyes, that hungry glint, made him uneasy. After dessert, Catherine offered him tea. It helps you sleep, she said. You look tired. Good, Chris said, holding up a hand. Her smile froze for the briefest moment before returning. Of course, Rose whisked him away to her old room, trying to drown his tension with jokes and kisses. Though her presence warmed him, the house felt chilled. Like the walls were listening, he slept lightly. Dreams came in flashes, running through trees, whispers he couldn't decipher, sense of falling without ever hitting the ground. Chris woke before dawn and stepped outside. Needing air, mist clung to the lawn. The woods looked like a curtain of ghosts. He was halfway across the yard when a dark figure appeared out of nowhere. Walter, sprinting straight toward him. Not jogging. Not exercising. Running full tilt, like a soldier charging into battle, Chris froze. Walter thundered past him without a word, veering sharply at the last second, disappearing into the darkness. The silence afterward felt too heavy, too vast. Chris turned slowly back toward the house and saw Georgina in an upstairs window. Watching him in the pre-dawn dimness, her head tilted, her smile too bright. To still, a chill spread through him. He realized then that Rose's home wasn't just unfamiliar. It was wrong in a way he couldn't articulate, a dissonance humming beneath every polite word and warm smile, and the weekend had only begun. The next morning arrived with an unnatural stillness. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in chilly shafts, illuminating motes of dust that drifted lazily as if time had slowed inside the Armitage household. Chris dressed quietly so he wouldn't wake Rose. He needed a moment alone, a chance to reset his nerves. He stepped onto the porch, inhaling the cool morning air. It helped, but not enough. He wandered a little down the path that led toward the woods. Birds chirped somewhere overhead. A breeze whispered through the trees. At first, the forest seemed peaceful, but the deeper he looked, the more he felt as though the trees were closing in around him. Everything felt a little too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. When he turned to go back, Walter stood on the pathway. Chris jolted, stepping back. "Damn, didn't see you?" Walter stared at him with perfect posture, hands clasped neatly behind his back. "Beautiful morning, sir," he said, smiling in a way that somehow made the moment more unnerving. "Yeah," Chris said slowly. "Couldn't sleep." Walter nodded. "Miss Rose is a deep sleeper." The way he said her name, soft, reverent, made something prick at the back of Chris's mind. Walter stepped closer. Too close. "You shouldn't worry about last night. I simply enjoy my late runs." "Right," Chris said. "All good." Walter's smile sharpened just slightly. "I know what you're thinking," he murmured, "but there's nothing to fear here." The words felt like a warning rather than comfort. Before Chris could respond, Walter walked away briskly, shoulders stiff, as if marching on invisible orders. Inside, breakfast was already bustling. Dean hummed cheerfully while flipping pancakes. Catherine arranged fruit in meticulous patterns. Georgina drifted across the kitchen with slow, doll-like motions. "Sleep well?" Dean asked, too brightly. "More or less," Chris replied. Catherine's gaze flicked toward him. "You look troubled?" "I'm fine." "Are you sure?" She pressed. "You were outside quite early." "I heard the door." "You heard?" "Never mind." Chris shook his head. "Just needed air." Dean laughed. "This place'll do that to you. Too quiet sometimes. Makes the mind wander." Chris couldn't disagree. Rose arrived, moments later. Hair wild, wearing one of his shirts. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. "Morning," she whispered. He held her hands gently. "Hey," she studied his face. "Something wrong?" He hesitated. "Just weird vibes. Your groundskeeper sprinted at me last night. Full speed." Rose blinked. "What?" "Don't worry." Dean called from the stove. "Walter's harmless. Former athlete. Still takes his conditioning seriously," Catherine added. "His dedication borders on obsessive, I'm afraid." Rose frowned. "I'll talk to them. Or we can just leave early if you want." He squeezed her hand. "No, it's just one more day. I'll be fine." He wasn't sure if he believed it. Later that afternoon, the Armitages hosted what Dean called a little gathering, which turned out to be a full-blown garden party with dozens of guests. Middle-aged couples in pastel clothing, elderly people in tailored suits, men Chris had never met, gripping his hand too eagerly. Women praising Rose as though she were a prize on display. Every conversation felt rehearsed. Guests asked about his work, his childhood, his phenomenal bone structure. One woman touched his arm without asking, murmuring how extraordinary his skin tone was. Another man talked athletically about potential and stamina. While appraising him like merchandise, Chris felt stripped examined from the outside by eyes that saw a body, not a person. He found brief solace in the shade of a tree, pulling out his phone to text his friend. "Chris. Bro, this place is messed up, Rod. Leave. White people in big houses in the woods never equals." Safety. Chris almost laughed. He snapped a photo of one guest who had been circling him repeatedly, a tall, expressionless man leaning heavily on a cane. When the flash went off accidentally, the man stiffened violently. His nose began to bleed. Suddenly he lunged toward Chris, voice cracking through the peaceful murmur of the party. "Get out." The guests froze. The atmosphere fractured. "Get out," the man yelled again, reaching for Chris with trembling hands. Two other guests rushed in, pulling him back, speaking soothingly, as if calming a distressed child. Catherine hurried forward, apologizing profusely, insisting the man had a medical condition. Dean placed a heavy hand on Chris's shoulder. "I'm so sorry. He struggles with seizures. Sometimes he disassociates." Rose grabbed Chris's arm. "We're done. We're leaving tomorrow morning. No negotiations." Chris nodded numbly, but his thoughts spiraled. The man's expression wild, pleading burned into his mind. Get out. It didn't feel like a threat. felt like a warning. That evening, the house seemed to exhale with tension. Catherine and Dean retired early, claiming exhaustion. The guests were gone. Even the crickets outside had gone silent. Rose curled next to Chris in her room, tracing small circles on his chest. "You okay?" she whispered. "Not really. We're leaving first thing, I promise." He looked at her on his eyes. Soft smile, and some of the fear loosened. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah," he said. "Tomorrow." She kissed him gently. "Tomorrow." She fell asleep fast. Chris didn't. He needed proof he wasn't imagining things. He slipped out of bed quietly and crept downstairs, careful to avoid the squeaky step near the landing. The living room was dark, but moonlight glinted off shiny surfaces, the silver frames of old photographs, a polished bowl of ornaments, the glass door leading to the basement. That door was slightly open. Curiosity tugged at him. He stepped inside and descended. The basement air was cool, smelling faintly of soil and something chemical. His phone flashlight illuminated old boxes, faded furniture, and near the far wall a row of framed photos. He approached slowly. His heart stopped. There was Rose, younger but unmistakable, smiling with her arm around a different boyfriend, then another, all of them black, all looking like they had been romantically involved with her. And then his stomach dropped. A photo of Rose standing next to Walter, both smiling. A photo of Rose with Georgina, holding her hand. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern. Footsteps creaked overhead. Chris sprinted up the stairs. Rose was awake in the hallway, wearing pajamas, eyes puffy. When she saw his expression, she straightened. "Chris, what, you lied," he said, voice low. "You said I was your first." Her eyes flashed with something he couldn't read. Fear, guilt, calculation. "Chris, please, I saw the pictures." She swallowed, her throat tightening. "You need to give me the keys," he said. "We're leaving now." She stepped back. "Can't, Rose, give me the keys." Downstairs, Dean appeared in the foyer. Catherine emerged from the parlor, smoothing her dress. Jeremy walked in from the kitchen, twirling something metal in his hand, a slim baton. "It's okay, sweetheart," Dean said calmly to Rose. "Just hand him to him." But Rose didn't move. "Where are the keys?" Chris repeated. She finally reached into her pocket, where a second relief washed over him until she stepped backward, clutching the keys tightly behind her. "I can't let you leave," she whispered. The world went silent. Chris backed away, breath quickening. Jeremy lunged, but Chris knocked him back, adrenaline surging. He turned to run. Reaching for the front door, a sharp clink sounded. Catherine tapped her silver spoon against a cup. Twing! The sound sliced through the air like a blade. Chris froze mid-step. The floor tilted, his vision blurred. "Sink," Catherine murmured. He fell backward into darkness heavy, suffocating darkness, free-falling into what felt like an endless void. He tried to scream, but no sound came, only the echo of Catherine's voice drifting through the black. "Now we can begin." He didn't know how long he floated in that nothingness. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. Time lost all shape in the emptiness of the sunken place. When he finally blinked awake, he was strapped to a leather chair in a dim room. A flickering television played an old, grainy video of Dean explaining something about consciousness, about immortality, about vessels. Chris's pulse hammered. His wrists burned against the straps. On the TV, Dean smiled warmly. As if delivering a lecture, not a nightmare. "Don't fight it," he said. "This is an honor." Chris jerked against the restraints, panic seizing him. The door creaked open. Dean entered, wearing a surgeon's apron. "Ready?" Dean asked gently. Chris's mind raced. His breath came in razor-edged bursts. He needed to plan anything. Then he remembered the cotton stuffing coming loose from the chair. He tilted his wrists, rubbing frantically until tufts of the cotton came free. He shoved them into his ears, muffling all sound, especially Catherine's hypnotic triggers. Dean approached with calm precision, but Chris was already bracing himself. Dean leaned closer, and Chris sprang. He ripped a hand free, grabbed a nearby tool, and struck. Chaos erupted, shouts, blood, footsteps thundering from upstairs. Chris fought through pain, panic. And the house itself, as it seemed to twist around him, Georgina appeared at one point, her face flickering between anger and something pleading beneath it. Walter blocked a doorway, trembling with confusion, trapped behind the mask of someone else's control. Chris didn't stop, couldn't stop. He burst onto the lawn, lungs burning. Behind him, Rose called his name not sweetly, not lovingly, but with cold authority. He looked back once, just once. Her smile was gone. Her face was blank, like she had never been Rose at all. Chris ran toward the road, toward the woods, toward anything that wasn't that house running with the momentum of survival itself. Somewhere in the distance, tires screeched. A car approached. For one terrible moment, he thought it was another trap, but the voice that shouted his name was unmistakable. "Chris, get in." It was Rod. Chris collapsed into the passenger seat. Rod floored the accelerator. The Armitage estate shrank behind them, swallowed by the forest. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Only when the house was truly gone did Chris finally breathe. He didn't know what came next, but he had escaped and he wasn't going back.